Rome seemed to own the world. Her empire stretched from Scotland to the Sahara. Her army controlled 3 continents. 50 million people lived under her laws. Rome's empire was the greatest political prize the world had ever seen. This is the story of those who would do anything to win it. Augustus had given Rome a sense of pride, stability, and prosperity. Yet he'd failed to provide what every dynasty needs most: a sense of security. Imperial power seized by force could always be lost to force. Insecurity plagued Augustus's successors, and their paranoid delusions would be the undoing of his dynasty. Ironically, the biggest threat came from the Praetorian Guard, the elite troops meant to protect emperors, not kill them. Problems soon surfaced in the reign of Tiberius, Rome's second emperor, who struggled in the shadow of Augustus throughout his reign. In 23 AD, after 9 years on the throne, Tiberius retired to the island of Capri, exhausted by the pressure of power in Rome.
Anyone who holds power is challenged all the time. Tiberius said, holding on to power is like holding on to a wolf by its ears. You know, it's this thing that can come round and bite you at any moment.
Tiberius left Rome in the care of Sejanus, his trusted Praetorian commander. But Sejanus did not want to help the emperor. He wanted to be emperor. And with Tiberius away from Rome, he played on the emperor's paranoia. Sejanus told Tiberius conspiracies existed all over Rome, but they were just a smokescreen to justify the murder of anyone who stood between him and the imperial throne. He even imprisoned the emperor's family. Oblivious, Tiberius made Sejanus his co-consul in 31 AD. The truth finally reached Capri. The emperor acted quickly. He invited Sejanus to the Senate, promising a promotion. But it wasn't a letter of promotion. It was a warrant for his arrest. Sejanus never made it to trial. His treachery highlighted a fundamental problem in imperial Rome. Everyone knew that the Praetorian Guard watched over the emperor. But who watched over the Praetorian Guard? Tiberius responded just in time. Caligula, his successor, wouldn't be so lucky. Rome's third emperor was notoriously brash, particularly towards the Senate. But Caligula is best remembered for another relationship with his racehorse, Incitatus. The emperor gave the horse a marble house and an ivory bed. He regularly invited the horse to dinner in the imperial palace and even threw huge parties for him. But Caligula topped everything when he recommended his horse be elected consul, the leading magistrate in Rome. To some people, it was more than the whim of a madman.
Say you're sitting in the White House, and as usual, Congress is being difficult, And you want to say, I want to go in front of the American people and I want as president to demonstrate my contempt for Congress. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to make my dog a congressman. I'm going to say to the American people, I value the Congress and what they have to say as much as I do what my dog says when it barks. So when Caligula made his horse a consul, that's a fantastically clever political insult to the Senate.
Rome's rich and powerful were not so impressed. On the 24th of January, 41 AD, they bribed the Praetorian Guard to murder the emperor. But they wouldn't have killed Caligula if they knew of the horror to come. By the middle of the 1st century AD, Romans thought the worst had passed. Yet Nero, Rome's 6th emperor, would change all that. In the beginning, they were just rumors.
Nero practiced every kind of obscenity, and after defiling almost every part of his body, he finally invented a novel game. He was released from a cage dressed in the skins of wild animals and attacked the private parts of men and women who stood bound to stakes. Suetonius.
Had imperial power gone mad?
Romans see their past as this mixture of heroes and villains. And don't forget, it's senators who are writing the history. This history is not straight reportage of objective fact. This is a political battle between the aristocracy and the emperors. It's in the aristocrats' interest to belittle emperors. They can't belittle them while they're alive. They belittle them while they're dead.
But Nero was as much a victim of imperial power as its villain. His father died when he was only 3. He was brought up by his overbearing mother, Agrippina, who had one ambition: to make her son emperor. The young Nero never shared her passion for the throne. As a child, he showed more interest in art than politics, but his mother deliberately ridiculed his musical talents. In 54 AD, at the tender age of 16, Nero became an unwilling emperor. He began by doing what emperors were supposed to do. He provided for the poor, building massive public baths and handing out cash to every Roman citizen. Rome, it seemed, was in capable hands, but whose hands were they? Agrippina still exercised a humiliating influence over her son. She minted coins that showed her next to the emperor. Nero was furious. He turned to the one thing he loved and thought he was good at: the theater. Yet Rome's performing artists were normally slaves, courtesans, or foreigners, never emperors.
How could one endure to hear, let alone see, a Roman, a senator, a Caesar, an emperor named on the program as a contestant? In putting on the mask of an actor, he has thrown off the dignity of his sovereignty. Cassius Dio.
When Agrippina joined the public outcry, Nero snapped. He immediately banished his mother from Rome. But distance did not solve the problem. Agrippina's repeated criticism incensed Nero. In a fit of anger, he asked the Praetorian Guard to silence his mother once and for all. Romans were appalled. It was their first glimpse of the emperor's brooding insecurity. Nero scrambled to resurrect his public image.
What Nero then does is a very dangerous experiment in playing to the people, because he plays in ways which traditionally have been defined as beyond the pale. To perform as a charioteer is definitely breaking all sorts of status barriers. And yet the charioteers are the pop stars of the day.
Nero's antics seem to have saved him. In 64 AD, a huge fire swept through Rome, destroying a third of the city. Half the population was left homeless. Nero's response was equally tragic. In the ashes of the devastated city, he built a massive 50-acre palace. His golden house had lavish gardens and huge lakes, even a private zoo. The emperor finally had what he'd always wanted, a peaceful retreat from political life. Rumors quickly circulated that the emperor had intentionally started the fire to clear space for his new palace. Nero panicked. He frantically searched for a scapegoat and settled on an obscure cult that had recently arrived in Rome.
Nero substituted as culprits and punished with the utmost refinements of cruelty a class loathed for their vices, who the crowd called Christians. Vast numbers were convicted and derision accompanied their end. They were covered with wild beast skins and torn to death by dogs, or were fastened to crosses and burned to serve as lamps by night. Tacitus.
Most Romans felt sympathy for the victims. Nero's propaganda exercise had clearly failed. Once again, he took refuge in his own artistic fantasies and set off on a singing tour of Greece.
The Greeks alone are worthy of my efforts. They really listen to music. Nero.
Not surprisingly, the most powerful man in the world won every competition he entered. The emperor bribed judges and forced audiences to sit through every performance.
No one was allowed to leave the theatre during recitals, however pressing the reason. We read of women in the audience giving birth and of men being so bored with listening and applauding that they shammed death and were carried away to burial. Suetonius.
Romans were outraged by Nero's indulgence and incompetence. On June 9th, 68 AD, the Senate declared Nero a public enemy and sentenced him to death. But Nero chose a far more theatrical end. He took his own life. His final words,
What an artist the world is losing.
it was the end of Rome's first imperial dynasty. Augustus had ruled with restraint. Tiberius had ruled with indifference. Nero hadn't really ruled at all. The tragic demise of Rome's first imperial dynasty would echo for centuries to come. There would be emperors in Rome for another 400 years. But their dynasties would all rule with the same rhythm of power. Like Augustus, they'd start off promising the best of times. Their generosity would give Rome its grandeur. their armies would guarantee the empire its peace. But like Nero, their reigns would end in catastrophe. Excess would undermine Rome's greatness. Delusions would condemn millions to die. Power and glory, the curse of imperial Rome.